3,500 years have passed since the death of Paul Atreides, the man once known as Muad'Dib. His empire, born from prophecy and drenched in the blood of jihad, was handed over to a new kind of sovereign, not merely a ruler, but a being transfigured beyond human measure. Leto II Atreides, son of Paul, did not inherit an empire. He forged one, not through conquest, but through metamorphosis, through sacrifice, through a vision so vast it swallowed his soul and calcified into what he would call the Golden Path. In this video, we journey into the myth, the biology, and the design behind the God Emperor, to understand what it means to become a god not for worship, but for salvation. At the end of Children of Dune, Leto II makes a decision no other human had dared. He abandons the very definition of humanity. In an act of deliberate transformation, he merges his flesh with the sand trout, the juvenile phase of the sandworm of Arrakis. These ancient leathery creatures latch onto his skin, not as parasites, but as armor, sealing moisture, shaping form, and beginning a gradual but irreversible process of metamorphosis. His voice deepened into a subterranean rumble. His scent was that of the spice. He could no longer pass as anything human. He became a creature of paradox. Prophecy made flesh and pain made purpose. He was grotesque and divine, a vision of the sacred made monstrous. The physical consequences were staggering. His skin was impenetrable, able to deflect blades, bolts, even lasgun fire. His perception became superhuman. He could hear seismic vibrations miles away, detect atmospheric shifts, and feel the tremble of thought in the air. Time no longer moved for him. He existed outside it. But these gifts came with a cruel price. He lost all capacity for physical intimacy. The sand trout armor would reject any touch, absorb any warmth. He could not feel a lover's embrace, nor the comfort of another's hand. His human face faded, replaced by a grim, impassive mask of living tissue. The more he endured, the less he remembered what it meant to be fragile. He tried in rare moments to speak with those he once might have called kin, but even his presence was unbearable. People trembled before him. Some wept, some went mad. His laughter, when it came, was terrifying. Immortality, he discovered, was not a crown. It was a crucifix. He would endure not in triumph, but in exile, a sovereign in a palace of silence, an emperor of bone and prophecy. He stopped being a man. He became time incarnate, an unblinking witness to the death of what he once was. Leto II reigned for 35 centuries. No throne in human history ever bore such constancy. While dynasties collapsed, revolutions swept away empires, and ideologies decayed into myths, his regime stood unshaken, a colossus that neither time nor rebellion could erode. And yet, it was not a paradise. It was a prison carved in gold and silence. Leto enforced a harsh peace, one that suffocated rather than persuaded. Conflict was extinguished not by understanding, but by absolute control. All standing militaries were abolished. The fish speakers, his all-female army, served as both priesthood and police. Their loyalty bordered on the religious. He controlled the veins of civilization. Transportation was rationed, communication was censored, and reproduction itself was curated. Even love, even art, became quiet rituals of survival. All travel between planets was monitored and sanctioned. Every organization, from the Spacing Guild with its navigators shrouded in spice fumes, to the secretive Bene Gesserit, to the manipulative Bene Tleilax, bowed before him. They operated only at his pleasure, always under surveillance. The spice was his dominion. Arrakis, transformed into a green and fertile world under his reign, ceased to produce it naturally. He alone held the reserves. Without spice, there was no space travel, no extended life, no prescience. The universe depended on him not by choice but by necessity. In this, he was less a ruler and more a bottleneck of fate. His palace in On, a massive construct of stone and silence, stood at the center of a world reborn. It was no pleasure dome, no Versailles of opulence. It was a fortress temple, a tomb built for the living. Its corridors echoed with whispers, never laughter. Pilgrims arrived daily, bearing gifts, offering prayers. But their worship was transactional. They feared him, and in that fear he found purpose. This was the peace of stagnation, as he named it, a long stillness where nothing could grow wild, where innovation gasped beneath bureaucracy, where even rebellion had to be permitted. It was peace enforced by inertia. And at the center of this controlled quietude lay the golden path, a prescient vision of humanity's future extinction, unless diverted from the path of comfort, predictability, and control. He saw a species on the brink of collapse, too centralized, too fragile, too visible. The golden path was his answer, a brutal re-engineering of destiny through millennia of suffering. Every decision he made, every act of cruelty, was a stone laid in that path. He shaped the future, not with compassion, but with constraint. He was not blind to the cost. He knew they would hate him. He desired it, for only through that hatred could they be taught to flee, to scatter, to become something ungovernable. And so he reigned, not as a god of mercy, but as a god of necessary chains. Tyranny breeds rebellion, and Leto knew this. In fact, he cultivated it like a gardener cultivates thorns among roses, deliberately, methodically, and with a cruel kind of patience. His court became a theater of recursion, anchored around the eternal return of a single man, Duncan Idaho. Resurrected by the Bene Tleilax across the centuries, Duncan appeared again and again as a Gola, each time grown anew from genetic remnants, each time slightly different. Leto ensured it. Each Gola bore not just the memories of the man he once was, but new fractures, new tensions, new failings. Some Duncans rebelled, some submitted, some formed bonds with Leto that bordered on affection or loyalty, though often strained by the weight of memory and purpose. Others tried to kill him. One led an insurrection. One became a contemplative philosopher. Another wept at the realization of how many times he had died for nothing. Each of them was a variable in Leto's labyrinthine experiment, a test not merely of loyalty but of memory, identity, and the capacity to surprise. Leto prized unpredictability and emotional volatility in his Golas. It was only through such traits that he could hope to shape a humanity resistant to prescience and manipulation. The Tleilaxu, masters of genetic subterfuge, reveled in this cycle. They embedded codes in Duncan's DNA, sleeper triggers hidden beneath strands of memory. Some Duncans were seeded with lust, others with unquenchable rage. A few were weapons disguised as men, ticking time bombs of old vendettas. But Leto, whose prescience flowed like water through the folds of the future, saw their every move. He let them play. He welcomed it. The Bene Tleilax were dangerous, but they were not alone. The Ixians loomed larger in Leto's concerns. Veiled behind secrecy, their machines grew ever more intelligent, more autonomous. Computers, still taboo under the lingering Butlerian ethos, began to edge back into acceptability, masked as navigation systems, analytical matrices. Leto saw the coming storm. Technology, once banished, was slinking back through the cracks in human arrogance. He allowed it to a point. He needed the Ixians to challenge him. He needed rebellion to fester in safe, visible corridors. The illusion of resistance was vital to the myth of freedom. And yet, not all rebels were illusions. Then came Siona, the crack in the glass, the echo he could not anticipate. She was not bred by the Tleilaxu, nor shaped by Ix, She was born of the Atreides line. She was his legacy and possibly his undoing. Siona, a descendant of Leto himself through the preserved Atreides bloodline, became the axis upon which the God Emperor's ultimate design would pivot. Rebellious, daring, and fierce, she was everything he had cultivated over millennia. A spirit unbroken by doctrine, immune to dogma, and yet she was something more. An anomaly even his near-omniscient foresight could not fully contain. Her very unpredictability was the key. Unlike the Duncans or the fish speakers, she was not a tool placed on the board. She was a storm born of it. And Leto knew that such chaos, if harnessed without extinguishment, could break the deterministic prison that prescience had become. To reveal the nature of her existence and its importance, Leto permitted her access to his secret journals, volumes penned over centuries, where his divine loneliness bled into parchment. These were not proclamations of power, but personal confessions, of anguish, of love lost, of the burden of foresight. In these pages, she read not the boasts of a tyrant, but the plea of a god, desperate to be outlived. What she discovered shattered her. The rebellion she had embraced, the defiance she believed her own, had been cultivated by Leto from the moment of her birth. Her allies, her adversities, her very temperament, all had been observed, guided, measured. Her outrage became existential. But even in that revelation, she found clarity. She was not chosen to succeed Leto. She was chosen to surpass him. Her trial was not a battle or a ritual, but the test of exposure to the full scope of Leto's intentions. She did not break, she endured. And through that endurance, something in her changed. Her genetic pattern, once clear to all prescient vision, blurred and then vanished. She stepped beyond the reach of oracles. She became, in essence, invisible to the future. In her DNA bloomed the seed of a humanity that would no longer be a script in the mind of a god, but a chaos of free will. Through her lineage, a line born from the agony of engineered divinity, would arise a species unbound. She was the mother of an unseeable future, and through her blood, the universe would scatter and multiply, breaking into 1,000 unpredictable destinies. Siona did not kill Leto, but she ended the need for him, and that, he always knew, was the final purpose of his golden path. It ended as he knew it must, not with thunder or fire, but with silence and inevitability. A final conspiracy, born not of rage but of understanding. Duncan, yet another Gola, forged by the Tleilaxu but shaped by centuries of observation and rebellion, had found within himself a cause greater than obedience. He had become a man unwilling to serve a god. Nayla, once the most fanatical of the fish speakers, remained fiercely loyal until the very end. Her participation in the final events was not born of rebellion, but obedience. She followed Siona's orders because she believed Leto had commanded her to do so. Her faith never truly wavered. It was weaponized. Siona, unpredictable, unseen by prophecy, born of the very genetic design that would end prescience itself, moved now, not as pawn, but as catalyst. Together, they formed a trinity of change, memory, faith, and future. And Leto, ever the architect of his own demise, permitted the play to unfold as foreseen. Every step, every word, every betrayal, he had dreamed it, weighed it, allowed it. The final act occurred in On a bridge that spanned the river Idaho, itself a monument to the man who now moved against him. There, amid the chants of pilgrims and the murmurs of a planet made lush by his tyranny, the trap was sprung. Leto's titanic body was cast into the waters below, not by violence but by orchestration. He fell willingly, his massive form breaching the surface like a sacred leviathan. For the sand trout, water was death. The centuries of symbiosis ended in seconds. His flesh ruptured. His consciousness, once distributed across a body part worm, part man, fragmented and dissolved. But it was not annihilation. As his physical form disintegrated, it seeded the waters and the sands beyond. From his remains, new sand trout emerged, merging and growing into the first generation of sandworms the world had seen in millennia. With them came the promise of spice, of the cycle reborn. The desert, buried under green dominion, would rise again. Dunes would swallow forests, storms would replace winds, and from the grains of that rebirth, the myths of the Fremen, once silenced by the peace of empire, would awaken. The crysknives, the stillsuits, the spice dreams, all would return. And so too would the memory of Leto II, not as tyrant, but as the god who died so life could change. Leto's sacrifice was never about the present. It was a wager placed on the distant horizon, on a future he would never see but one he shaped with ruthless precision. By reigning as a tyrant, he instilled a primal fear deep in the psyche of humanity, the terror of being ruled, of being watched, of living lives already written in the ink of prescience. His empire was not just a political machine, it was a psychological crucible, one that forged a collective trauma. No one under his reign could forget the weight of control, and that was exactly the point. He engineered a scar, a cultural, generational wound that would never quite heal, and from which humanity would run as far and as fast as it could. And so, they fled. After his death, the barriers of empire shattered. With no god on the throne, with no central authority dictating movement or bloodlines, billions scattered into the unknown. The scattering, vast tides of human diaspora spilling outward into uncharted space. Ships vanished into fold space, entire cultures seated in silence, each one a potential splinter of possibility. New languages were spoken, new faiths born. Some colonies collapsed into chaos, others ascended into enlightenment. Some embraced machine logic, others rediscovered primitive mysticism. There were tyrannies, democracies, anarchies, but none of them could be foreseen. That was the triumph. From the ashes of his reign came a universe filled not with order but with noise, glorious, uncontrollable, irreducible noise. Leto became a shadow cast across every frontier. His name was spoken in fear, in reverence, in dismissal. On some worlds, he was worshipped as the worm god who birthed the stars. On others, he was cursed as the beast who caged 1,000 generations. But always his echo remained, in the myths of forgotten colonies, in the spice dreams of exiles, in the silence between the stars where prescience no longer reached. His was the tyranny that shattered certainty, the godhood that fractured fate, the prison that taught its inmates how to escape. And so, from a single being's sacrifice, the future unfurled in directions he could not and would not control. That was the essence of his golden path. Leto II Atreides was not a hero. He was not even a man. He was a force, an ancient wind carved in flesh, whose reign shaped the very trajectory of the human species. He taught the universe a truth few dared to speak, that freedom is not granted but engineered, and that sometimes the greatest love demands the deepest cruelty. When he died, he did not vanish. He entered myth. He became the archetype of the necessary tyrant, the one who suffers so others may flourish. As the Imperium fractured and the Bene Gesserit whispered new plans, one question lingered. What if true freedom is not in knowing the future, but in escaping it? And so the God Emperor passed into legend. But his footsteps, heavy and sacred, still echo across the stars.